Coming your way in a moment on Jude Bellingham. Let's hear from Bellingham, though, last night, because he popped up and scored a world-class goal just when Southgate needed it. Let's face it, if he hadn't, we'd have been talking about Southgate maybe this morning being out of a job and England on the plane home. That didn't happen. England have progressed. Jude Bellingham, post-match, was asked about the pressures of playing for England.
It's a combination of a lot of things, you know. You playing for England is an enjoyable feeling, but it's also a lot of pressure. You hear people talk a lot of rubbish, and you know it's nice that when you deliver, you can give them a little bit back. You know, it's very difficult in press conferences and interviews and things like that to talk as openly as footballers want to, because they're always judged. And for me, football and being on the pitch, scoring goals, celebrating is my release. And you know, it's maybe a message to a few people, but it was a very happy moment and full of adrenaline.
Simon, maybe a message to a few people. I mean, what's he saying there? People talk rubbish, so it's good to give a bit back.
I don't really know what he's referring to. He's obviously referring to the fact that people have been very critical, and people, both ex-players and pundits and people that are supposed to only say things that are praising the team. And if that team feel that they're being unfairly observed upon, probably most of the content they haven't actually heard. Because the difficulty for me is, Jim, is that criticism isn't often constructive. And then, you know, the team are winning games, and we're all very unhappy with their performance. And the performance yesterday was turgid. All of the four games we've played in, we've been poor in, but we've gotten results out of it, and we were in a results business. So we do have to temper the scenario of forecasting the impending doom. And every time we get to the next stage, we get through it. However we get through it, we get through it. But Jude, for me, exhibited a strange attitude yesterday, you know, on the media platform, in terms of, you know, his attitude towards people saying rubbish. I don't know who he's referring to. I mean, it would appear that no one is allowed to criticise England players. It would appear that Gareth Southgate said last week, careful what you do with these players because they'll go back to not enjoying playing for England. Well, does that mean then that the only way you can observe upon England as a team is to praise them? And when they don't play very well, you have to say nothing, because otherwise you're going to have this sort of prickly response from the manager, this prickly response from a 21-year-old kid who is still developing, a very talented player, but quite frankly, the last 2 or 3 games, besides the wonder goal, has been pretty poor. I mean, he was pretty poor for most of the game yesterday. He spent most of his time gesticulating at his frustrations at both himself and others around him, and I was surprised he was still on the pitch. Now, of course, the fact that he scored a goal justifies the decision to keep him there. But there clearly is this attitude coming out of the England camp that they are being unfairly dealt with by the media and by sections of it. And I'm afraid in the real world where we all have to live, if you are supposed to be the top of the crop and you are supposed to be the best in class and you don't perform that way, then you're going to attract criticism. I don't like it. I don't like to see beer glasses being thrown at Gareth Southgate in Cologne that we saw a little bit of when we were in the game against Slovenia. I don't like to see fans booing because they don't like the style of play, but I get it because it's the price on the ticket, and England have got to be better.
Yeah. I mean, Jude better get used to it. What do you make of his body language, Dan?
Yeah, he looked frustrated, a little bit like he doesn't like the criticism, which I get. But at the same time, as Simon said there, it comes with playing for England. Like, whether you play in a major tournament or you play in a friendly, I always felt like you're on trial. Like, people are looking to reasons why you shouldn't be in the squad, reasons why you should be in the squad. And for Jude, I think they're letting too much of the outside noise influence some of their performances.
Yes.
Like, we're all going in the same direction. We all want England to do well. But like Gary Lineker and Harry Kane, for instance, I thought everything Gary said was constructive. I don't think he went personal. He said what we've all been thinking, which he needs to do more. He needs to be better. And if you can't take that, Harry Kane's experience, Jude Bellingham, I know he's a young kid, but he's played a lot of football. These guys are experienced guys. He plays for the biggest club in the world, Real Madrid. No, you get scrutinised probably more playing for them than you do for England. So the fact that they're all kind of making this noise saying they don't like it, they're creating a divide that Gareth Southgate's tried to bring back together. But I think what's different between then and now is that with these players and the social media, it's everywhere. And now it's not just journalists, because that's what it was. It was journalists and it was supporters. Now everyone's got an opinion. And not only that, they've all got their phones, they've all got their social media followers. Unless you're going to be really strong-minded and go, do you know what, I'm not going to look at it or I'm not going to react to it, you can't keep it out, unfortunately.
Is it that, or are they more thin-skinned now about criticism that comes their way, Alex?
I think maybe they are more thin-skinned. Gareth alluded to the fact there's a lot of young players in the squad. A lot of them, it's their first major tournament experience. For Bellingham, maybe he's used to being eulogised over in Spain, and maybe he's got it in his head that actually back in England he gets criticism because he's not playing in the Premier League. Maybe there's a little bit of jealousy. I don't necessarily buy into that, but speaking to Spanish journalists, certainly that's the impression that they're under. But I maintain what I said a few minutes ago. the scrutiny on this England team and on this England manager and the vitriol that gets directed towards them is nowhere near what the likes of Graham Taylor, Steve McLaren, even Bobby Robson back going into Italia 90 had to put up with. I think they're much more fairly treated now by the media.
You think that, Simon? I mean, scrutiny is just part of it all, isn't it?
Well, I think there's a sense of entitlement in characters in society where you can't criticise people, you can only praise. And it doesn't just pervade England's football team, it pervades society full stop. If you push somebody under pressure, you have to be careful for their mental health. And this characteristic that we've got in terms of society suggesting that you have to operate in a certain way is now in the England team. They are a product of that generation. There's a sense of entitlement. We build these players up. They should be at the table talking about PSR. They should be at the table negotiating which games they should play in and which games they shouldn't play in, how many fixtures they're playing, and all of this breeds a sense of entitlement. So then that means that you become bulletproof in your little institutionalised world of football where only things that you can hear are praise. So when you get criticism, fair and justified criticism, I think the comparisons of what happened in the past, the behaviour of the press in the past with people like Graham Taylor I thought was despicable. And it was a very low bar. So we shouldn't look back on that and say, well, they don't get anything like that, because that was just despicable press. It was gutter press and had no substance.
Have we gone too far the other way, though, Simon? Could we be a little bit more scathing than we are? Perhaps we're not here to be cheerleaders, are we?
No, absolutely we're not. And I think the thing about it is that the observations that I haven't heard, to go to Jude's expression, any rubbish. Now, there'll always be some extremes. And if you want to listen to social media, if you want to listen to a bunch of randoms making observations upon you and then use that as an excuse to be irritated or not perform, that's upon you. You're either an England player, an elite footballer, or you're not. And the manager has to take that responsibility of building that culture into their players to have some resilience. We talk about resilience, and the lack of resilience seems to be something that's disconcerting. Now, they may well use this as a strength. They may well get their little victims complex into play and use it as an opportunity to girdle their loins and push back against what they think is an unfair set of observations by whoever it is, whether it's Alex Crook in this instance, or whether it's Simon Jordan in another instance, or whether it's Gary Lineker because he kicked a ball and must not ever break the code of conduct of criticising a player in a dressing room that he was once part of. All of that is rubbish. It's nonsense. And the issues around England at this moment in time is that the players aren't playing very well. And I was interested to hear what Darren was saying about a policy of appeasement. Who are they appeasing then? Who's being appeased? Is Phil Foden being appeased by playing wide left when he doesn't want to play there? What did you mean when you talked about appeasement, Benty?
In terms of what? Phil Foden playing on the left?
No, in terms of you said there were too many players being appeased. Who's being appeased?
Yeah, so I think Phil Foden is one of them.
He's not being appeased. He's been played in the wrong position. How's he being appeased?
Also, what I'm basically trying to say is that Gareth's putting him in the squad, putting him in the team because he's one of England's better players. So even though he's not comfortable playing out there on the left, he's still putting him out there because he thinks, well,
yeah, but
he's the best option
But with
we've got.
respect, Darren, he's not being appeased. He's being played in the wrong position. So if he was being played in his right position and was playing poorly, then they'd be being appeased. We're judging Phil Foden by playing in a position that doesn't suit him. And ultimately, I'm just curious to see why we're saying that players. I would say that Bellingham's being appeased because he doesn't deserve to be in the team.
I was going to say that.
I would say that Kane's being appeased.
Bellingham's being indulged by playing him in that number 10 position, when actually the best way you can bring balance to this England team
put him next
all
to
along,
Rice,
I said this before the ball was kicked, was put him next to Declan Rice. You move Foden into the number 10, and then you probably play Cole Palmer on form, but maybe Anthony Gordon on the left-hand side.
Yeah.
Why Gareth Southgate hasn't realised that's the best way to play, I don't understand. He's the highest-paid coach of the tournament. As David Moyes will tell you, I've not got my coaching badges. If I can see that, why can't Gareth Southgate on his multi-million-pound contract?
Well, listen, potentially, I understand what you're saying there, but I think it's a case of for Phil Foden. Clearly doesn't fancy him at number 10. I think it's very different playing for Manchester City than it is playing for England, first and foremost. And I'm thinking, Gareth's thinking, well, you've got an opportunity. You either play left or you don't play. And I think we're now getting to that situation where it's like, I want to keep you in the team, Phil, but you're not really affecting anything, so you don't play. So I'd expect the next game, with the way that they've played in this first four, potentially, I feel like I'm picking on Phil Foden, but I'm not. But I just feel like the balance of the team, at the minute, he's not really.
I don't see him dropping him.
Sure.
I don't see him dropping him. I think it'll be the same front four again.
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.